Alright, lesson 4, measuring gauges. Identify the types of U for the measuring gauge. In the lesson, we'll discuss the following measure gauges: the thickness for the earlier, the gauge with the fixed for the leaf, the valve with the check of the measurement, small openings for the valve clearance, the narrow slots, such as pointing gaps and so forth, widely, U for the change, check flatness for the parts, and the straightening with the grinding operation, square object for the square. Wire and drill. Wire gauges, U for the gauge of metal wire with a similar gauge for the U for the check the side of the hot and cold rolled sealed sheet, plate, iron, music, wire, the drill gauge to determine the size of the drill and indicate the corrective of the size of the drill bit. U for the given type of the size of the drill, number the decimal size of the shown with the type of the gauge. Thread among the many gauge for the machine with the inspect the threads with the center of the gauge, the shoe, the pitch gauge, then the center of the gauge as U for the set threads and tool force scale for the gauge. U for the determine the number of threads per inch screw per pitch gauge for the U for the determine the pitch for the unknown thread, the pitch screw with thread with the distance between the center of the one tooth and the center of the next tooth. Small hole set for the four more gauge for the U for the check for the dimensions, small hole slot screws and so forth that you can measure the diameter of approximately 1/8 to 1/2 inch. Telescope and the gauge U for the measuring the inches inside slots holes up to 6 inches width of diameter. Fillet and radius of the thread gauge for the U for the check of the convex concave radii of the corners again for the shoulder drill point. The gauge U for the check of the accuracy of the drill cutting edge of the grinding layout. So you have to equip the 6-inch hook rule. This tool can be used with the drill point gauge, hook rule, plane rule, and slide caliper for taking outside measurements. Type of the gauge is thickness feeler. The thickness feeler gauge you've made the many shape of the usually 2 and 26 blades groups in the single tool with a gradually thousandth of an inch. Most thickness blades are straight with the other end bent at the end at 45 to 90 degree angle. With some of the thickness gauges are grouped so that they leave several short, several long blades together. Thickness gauges are also available with single blades in strip form, the specific measurement. The convenience of the many of the thickness gauges are equipped with a locking screw. In the case, the screw locks the blade to be used with the extended position. For the figure 49 shows the several types of the thickness of the gauge available with the Army supply system. Shows a single blade with a tapered leaf with tapered leaves and metric leaves and 13 leaves and 26 leaves. Twist drill with the drill rod gauge of the wire with the 50 with the part figure 50 with the part H, but have the series of the holes to the side of the dimensional size dimensional equivalent stamps edge for each for the whole. One gauge measure for the drill size of the numbers 1 to 60. The other gauge measures the drill size 1/16 to 1/2 inch by 1/64 of an inch intervals. Wire gauge figure 50 part B with the circular shapes cuts out of the outside of the perimeter cut the area to the different side of the wire 0 to 32 the English standard wire gauge. The separate gauge with the American standard wire. Another for user standard sheet and plate iron and steel. Alright, wire drilling gauges, part A and B, part A, and then part B. Thread center gauges. The figure 51 with the part A, the graduate with the 14th, 20th, and 24th, and 30th of an inch. The back of the center gauge of the table to give them a double the depth of the thread, the allowance of an inch each pair. With this information helps determine the size of the tap drills, 6-degree angle within shape of the gauge for the U within checking the unified American threads for the U.S. standard threads for the end checking thread cutting stools. Screw pitch gauge for the figure 51 part B with the U with checking the U.S. standard metric national form V form and width form worth cut threads of the gauge of the group in case of the handle of the thickness gauge, the number of threads per inch stamped on each of the blades, same time some type of the blades lock, triangle shaped gauge for the 51 blades covering the very wide range of the pitch, with include 11 and a half to 27 threads per inch in the V form threads. Figure center 1 shows the center screw, the pitch gauge of the part A and B. Center gauge screw pitch gauges B. Uses standard 27 pitch, width pitch 26 pitches, metric 28 pitches, 51 pitches. Small hole gauge figure 52 part A with the adjustable having the rounded measure for the member for the kernel screw with the end of the handle turn with the expand with the ball shape of the small hole 3 shaft with the micrometer caliper U with the measure for the ball and maximum spare measuring capacity 1/2 inch of the telescope and gauge with the figure 52 part with A B with the U with the K gauge larger hole with the measure for the inside diameter with the narrow kernel screw with the end of the hand locks the plunger in the measuring position. Maximum measuring capacity is 6 inches as with the small hole gauge the measurement that must be calibrated on the gauge U for the micrometer. Figure 52 shows the small hole and telescoping gauge part A and B, small hole figure in part A and telescoping in part B. Fillet radius. The blades of the fillet radius gauges are marked with a hard rolled steel, the double ended with the blade, figure 53, part A, with the half of the lock with the hole for the blades in position inside out with the measurement made with the same blade on the other gauge, figure 53, part B, separate blade with inside and outside diameter measurements. Each gauge is measured, marked in the 64th of the gauge A with the figure 53. The range is side with the 17/64 to 1/2 inch for the gauge 3, figure 53 inches, and side with the 1/32 of an inch and 7 to 7/64 of an inch. Each gauge has 16 blades. Fillet and radius gauges part A and B, 17/64 to 1/2 inch, 1/32 inch to 17/64 of an inch. Alright, your drill point gauge of the figure 54 consists of the 6-inch hook rule with a 59-degree with a sliding head, with the rule with the slides up and down, with the rule with the sliding head can be locked in any position, with the rule with the sliding head is graduated 1/32 of an inch. Figure 54 shows the drill point gauge. Exercise care with the thickness of the gauge. Measure clearance of the knife, the cutter of the measurements, and machine that do not lower the knife with the thickness blade, but to try to remove the gauge size if the blade has been shaved off if it's tight. Never use the gauge and clean size for the holes when the blades are damaged or worn, but the blade with them blades case for the remove of the loosening the clamp for the sliding out of the damaged blade. Install the new blade with a tighten the clamp to prevent the brush from destroying the gauge. Always cover the metal parts with light film or the oil. Store gauges within separate containers. Do not stack on the pile of gauges. Stack or pile of gauges. Always return blade with the left leaf type of the gauge into their case after use to keep the graduation marking on the gauge clean with a leachable. Do not drop a gauge with minute scratches or nicks will result in inaccurate measurement. Gauge uses thickness and feeler. Thickness feeler gauges are used in two ways of the measurement. Two ways and means of determining measurement. The means of adjusting definite limit with the figure 55 part A shows the thickness of the gauge being used in the piston ring gap clearing for the cylinder bore long blade. The thickness gauge you determine the thickness between the large mating strip of the figure 55 part B by combining the blades. It is possible to measure the wide variation of the thickness. Figure 55 shows the using thickness feeler gauge and wire drill. The drill gauge illustrated in the figure 56 part A. The side of the drill being determined the drill side with the number of the decimal side of the stamp on the gauge. Beside each of the hole, the chart of the gauge indicated the correct side of the drill. You given the type of the side, determine the side of the bullsheet stack on the wire. You can use the wire gauge shown in figure 56 part B. Figure 56 shows using the drill and the wire gauges on part A and B. Center gauge check the angle with the thread cutting tool. For the figure 57, the gauge used to check the thread with the scale with the U to measure the number of the threads per inch. The screw pitch gauge to measure for the pitch for the screw. The pitch for the screw is not known, but it's determined the comparing with the standard various screw pitch for the gauge for the shown figure 58. With the blade for the blade for the gauge over the threads for the check to see whether it meshes. If it is not necessary, successfully check each of the blade over the gauge against the thread until the match of the pitch can be read off correctly. The blade can be pointed to that so that it can be inserted in a small nut checking inside of the root as well as the outside threads. Figure 55 shows using a center gauge of the thread cutting tool. Checking the inside of the threads. Checking outside of the threads. Using the screw pitch gauge. Small hole in telescope. The the gauge of the measurement cannot be taken with a stand with a micrometer with no plug gauge with available to the telescope and gauge with a particular adaptable for the rough of the board work with the odd side with the shape of the holes. Use the compressor for the plunger locking, turning with a hand screw and insert for the gauge in the hole. Figure 59. Relief the lock and the plunger. Expand with the exact side with the hole lock and the plunger and turning with the handle of the lock and the plunger. Remove the gauge and check with the measurement and micrometer. Figure 59, use the telescope and the gauge to handle and the screw lock. Small hole with the gauge perform the function with the telescope and gauge, except for the use of the small work or the use of the small hole gauge for the fit with the ball shape point with the into the hole of the slot. Figure 60 part A, expand with the ball shape, the end of the turning of the screw end with the handle with the use of the micrometer gauge for the measurement. Figure 60 part B. Thread cutting tool to check with the correct with the thread cutting tool with the place for the proper gauge over the tool. Figure 61, Acme standard gauge here. The tool must mesh properly with no light showings between the tool and the gauge. Using a 29-degree angle to guide with the grinding of the cutting tool. The tool fits for the angle with the grinding the point with the fit with the power place for the gauge to indicate the number of the threads per to be cut. Figure 60 shows using a small hole gauge part A and B. Fillet and radius, double-ended radius gauge bit you check with the inside with the corner fill with the main machine part. Figure 62 part A with each of the blade can be locked in any position A with the angle for the both inside outside radii. Figure 62 part B. Figure 61 thread U for the thread cutting tool gauge. Drill point rod, the sharpening with the cutting of the edge of the drill. One lip at the same time at a time. Each lip must be same length with the angle of relation with the axle of the drill. This set with the sliding with a hard securely with a rock rule to add the maximum equal length of the drill to play with the drill vertically against the rule so the drill lip of the contract with a 59-degree angle with the sliding the head with the whole drill with the gauge for the opposite of the light with the correct angle is obtained with the light and seam between the gauge and the drill. Lesson 5, torque wrenches.